you is that Facebook is an open forum. This is a public page that I offer so that people can learn more about neurodivergent lifestyle and ask questions. But it's an open forum, so what you post is can be read by others, and it's open to both neurodiverse and neurotypical. So we're not just talking about the neurotypical group, although I have to say that's where I started. That's where I first, started talking to people about this lifestyle, was because as a neurotypical myself, I was struggling with how do I manage how hard it is, like this topic. So we're going to talk about why our Aspies don't seem to get us, see us, or hear us. We'll discuss ways to keep a healthy sense of self, even if your neurodiverse loved ones listen to the words, not to you. This will all make sense in a minute, too. We'll talk about how love is to know you intimately, not just your words. Love is about connecting. We'll discuss how to keep yourself solid when you have to deal with an empathy triad blind partner. Keeping yourself solid is important to keeping your love alive. And I have several things that I'm going to talk about that are events that are happening this month. And this is tied into this theme of why does it feel so hard? It feels hard because we're trying to connect with each other, and people in a neurodivergent relationship have different operating systems that seem to just keep colliding and conflicting. So um, we have to learn how to work around those conflicts as opposed to, um, getting stuck with uh, the anger and the hurt and the confusion. So I want to point out on the page here above, where I posted the topics for today, I've got a lot of links that you can use because we provide a lot of services. And one of those services is a free video call every month with Julie Rollins. She's in New Zealand. Julie is our ambassador for our meetup group. And if you're a member of the meetup group, I really urge you to go to Julie's new member orientation, and you don't have to be a new member, because she talks there about all the various ways to use the services that I I have for all of you. So a list of these links will take you to some of those. For example, the first one says podcast page. I just started a podcast, and I think there's 10 or 12 podcasts now. And I'm cranking out some new ones every once in a while, since podcasts seem to be easier for people. You can just put your headphones on and listen, or put it in the car and get information that way. I also offer several now online courses that I've been developing, online um, pre-recorded videos, and then we also have a monthly webinar for those people participating in the course. I have a link to the online course. Um, let's see, I have a free, what I call a mini course, where I sort of summarize also all the services. I give you some tips on that mini course, but I'd also summarize the books, the blogs, the newsletters, the courses, the meetup group, the advanced community forum. Um, and the course, by the way, and the webinar for the course are for both neurodiverse and neurotypicals. So a lot of times couples will take the course and then go in and talk with other people taking the course. The meetup, of course, was where we started back in June of 2009. I started the meetup group. That's when I published my first book, Going Over the Edge. That's when it first came out, and I started the meetup group to meet for lunch once a month and talk about this lifestyle. The meetup group still exists, although now it's virtual, and we have video calls and teleconferences, um, and a forum that you can talk to each other on Meetup. And if you want to leave me a question for the next live, I have a link down here for where you can post a question. It's a lot better if you put these questions on the link for me, at this, because then I can review them ahead of time and try to get to them at this recording. So let me think if there's something else. Oh, speaking of my first book and starting with Meetup, um, I've just completed the anniversary edition of Going Over the Edge, which I published 15 years ago. And I really have updated it quite a bit. And it's finally going to be an ebook as well as print. The publisher wouldn't put it in ebook form because all those years ago they just didn't think that was necessary. Can you believe that was only 15 years ago and they didn't think ebooks were going to be popular? So it'll be out, it's going to still take a few weeks, but it's almost ready to be out for all of you. Okay, so let's start talking about the topics about why it's so hard for us. And it's hard for people on the spectrum too, by the way, because they don't know why they're disappointing you. They might go to therapy and learn some things about this, but that doesn't mean that they fully comprehend what the problem is. So the first video conference that I'm offering is Why Doesn't My Aspie Get Me, See Me, Hear Me? And that's going to be held on Tuesday, March 19th. So here's the thing. These video conferences are for small groups that are members either of Meetup or the Advanced Community Forum. If you join the Advanced Community Forum, then you don't pay anything extra for any of the events that I'm talking about today. If you're in Meetup only, I think Meetup's a great place to start, because if you're sort of just learning your way around and you've just discovered that you've got a partner on the spectrum, and Meetup is just for the neurotypicals, by the way, not the neurodiverse folks. That's a good place to start. You'll learn a lot. And then after that, I would join the Advanced Community Forum, because that's where we've got all the recordings. That's where we've got all the recordings for the teleconferences, the video conferences. And so you can listen to, 10 years worth of recordings on topics like we're having today at this Facebook. So the first one is, why doesn't my Aspie get me, see me, hear me? And there's lots of reasons for that. Okay, they may get you. If there are people on the spectrum in the group tonight, I hope you speak up, because a lot of times people on the spectrum do get you, but they're terrible at affirming you. And when a neurotypical says, look me in the eye, or that you don't see me, you don't hear me, they don't mean that you're not listening to them talking. They mean you're not listening to your meaning. For neurotypicals, we want to be affirmed for what we mean, who we are deep down inside, not necessarily what we're talking about. So we'll talk about that problem in this first conference, is why don't they get me, see me, hear me? Because people on the spectrum need time to process everything, and they often get you, see you, hear you 2 days later, not in the moment. The next conference is another video conference. Love is to know you intimately, not just your words. So it's on a similar theme, right? That's March 26th. Oh, by the way, all the times that are posted on my website or here on Facebook or on Meetup are all Pacific time. But of course, with the modern technology, what happens is that you are able to have that time converted pretty quickly to you, no matter what time zone you're in. Julie, by the way, tries to host her new member orientation so that it coordinates with people all over North America and even Europe, as well as New Zealand and Australia, Singapore, and places like that. There are a few places where you probably have to get up in the middle of the night to attend some of these things. But remember, all of my events are recorded, so you can listen to them later. So love is to know you intimately, not just your words. So for neurotypicals, love is energy. It's a flow. I'm always saying love is a conversation. It really is offering a bid to the other person, a bid meaning a question, a comment, an offer to join me in my reality. Join me in my world. I want to step into your world. Love is not a thing, it's not fixing stuff. But for the neurodiverse, it's often I'm trying to understand your words. I'm listening to what you want. Many neurotypicals have heard this question before from their neurodiverse loved ones, haven't you? The question is, what do you want? They want to know what you want as opposed to just be with me. Love is just being with me deep down inside. So we'll talk about that on March 26th. We're not just going to talk about the problems. It's really important. At these conferences, we talk about the problem and then we talk about, well, what do we do? You know, how do we cope better, right? And by the way, as I'm describing these conferences, go ahead and put comments in the comment section if you want to. I'm happy to refer back, and because these a lot of times these topics will spark you to think about something and you want to ask a question about it. And then the teleconference for the month is on March 28th. And again, the topic is, why does my relationship feel so hard? So the teleconference is free to all members in Meetup and the Advanced Community Forum. There's no extra fee for this. And the only complication is you do have to make a phone call through the free conference call Ph.D platform. But I think it's pretty easy to do. There's numbers everywhere, or you can make a Wi-Fi call. So I think we have members usually from all over the world, all over Europe, Africa, South America, North America, Australia, China, India. People call in to the teleconference from all over the world. And again, it's recorded so you can listen to it again. Why does my relationship feel so hard? And the simple answer to that is that people who are neurodiverse or who are on the autism spectrum have a different operating system. They use a different method in their head for processing information and connecting with you. It's totally different. They don't use, for example, they don't use episodic memory. Neurotypicals use episodic memory. Episodic memory is remembering things and organizing everything according to your relationships, according to the people. Good question, Heidi. I want to get to that in just a second. Let's see here. I want to make sure I talk about one more conference, and then I want to answer Heidi's question. It's really good. The course is called Asperger Syndrome and Relationships. The course, the online, I have more than one online course, but I want to talk for you folks. The main one for you is Asperger Syndrome and Relationships. And this is for both for neurodiverse and neurotypical, so couples can take it. And then once a month, we hold a webinar for people who are taking the course to come in and just talk with each other. So you get a chance to talk to neurodiverse and neurotypicals who are trying to work out these problems in their lives. And the course webinar is, How Do I Love You? Let Me Count the Ways. So again, it's about getting past how we feel so bad because the love is not coming to us in ways that really make us feel loved, right? People on the spectrum might count the ways that they love you. Well, after all, I go to work and I make dinner and I pick up the kids and so forth. And those are kind things to do. They just don't necessarily feel loving. That's why I always say the love languages books don't really apply, because if you don't feel like the other person is connecting with you, then it doesn't feel like love. Okay, so let me go back to Heidi. She says, are you saying it always takes time for an ASPE to process every time I talk to them, days later, weeks later, how to make their processing go faster? So you're not going to be able to make their processing go faster. That's not true. You could possibly make the processing go faster if we can reduce their anxiety, right? What makes them anxious is that neurotypicals go really fast. We're very good at multitasking all the data that's in the context, whereas that transactional person on the spectrum needs time to analyze the data. We don't even realize that we're using all these pieces and we can tell what comes first, what comes second, what comes third. If you're on the spectrum, you're not very good at noticing the contextual cues, reading between the lines, um, and quickly assessing where you're coming from, where your partner's coming from, and then how to talk about it. You know, I just got a post on one of my blogs a couple of days ago from somebody who was upset with me again and said, people on the spectrum do too have empathy, and they just do not. They don't have empathy. Empathy is the ability to read the room, to understand where your partner's coming from and talk to them about it, to bring some kind of connection between where you're coming from, what you're feeling, how they're feeling, and keeping that energy flow going. They don't do that. They struggle with it. But like Heidi's saying, you know, are they able to process it later? If they get guidance to do that, yes. A lot of times, members in this group will, for example, will say, you know, my autistic partner has written me a wonderful email describing understanding everything that we just talked about, you know, the night before, 2 days before. And so, yes, they can put the pieces together, but not in the moment because they have a disconnect between the parts of themselves that help gather this information. That's why Peter Vermeulen's book, Autism as Context Blindness, is really important. It's not that your ASPE is context blind per se. They can see all the data, they just don't know which pieces of the data they're supposed to pay attention to. So that's why they ask you questions that don't make any sense. I wasn't talking about that. Don't ask me about that. But back to her question of how to make their processing go faster. Well, they need rest, they need good food, they need all the things that can help keep them healthy. But in addition, they need to reduce their anxiety. And their anxiety goes way up because they've had a lifetime of listening to neurotypicals say, you know what I mean? You know, you get it. Or are you listening to me? Well, we see all kinds of things that make them feel like, gosh, they're failing us. And I'm not saying it's our fault. Nobody explained that there were these differences. So let's go along here to the next one. Patricia says, if Aspies don't recall episodic memory, what do they use? Oh, okay, yeah. There's some real interesting research about this. We're getting more and more neuroscience that are helping us understand this developmental disorder. Got to remember that high functioning autism or autism 1 is a developmental disorder. It just means it's not a mental illness, but it does mean that the autistic brain has not evolved as smoothly as neurotypical. And so they use semantic memory. Can they do episodic memory? It's a lot of work. Okay, semantic memory is making lists, um, dates, uh, uh, what I call the factoids. They're good at managing all of that stuff. And we don't need all of that to pull an episode out that's just like this episode happening over here, just like this episode. So people on the spectrum are always complaining that my neurotypical spouse um, keeps talking about the pattern hasn't changed. When they've tried so hard to fix something, when the person on the spectrum has worked really hard to fix something so that their neurotypical loved one would feel better, you know, and they've done everything they can, and then he or she complains once again that the pattern hasn't changed. And it's because episodic processors know the patterns, right? We know the patterns. One of my jokes is about my daughter, my oldest daughter. She was 6 years old when I took her to Europe for the first time, and she's on the spectrum. So, but I heard mothers using the same language, mothers and fathers use the same language that I would use with her. Many times when she would, you know, start to walk out into the street, I'd say, "Pay attention, Bianca, pay attention." I would just be startled. She'd be walking out into the street. So I listened and I heard my a French friend. I'm not good. I don't speak French, so please bear with my terrible accent. But my French friend Annie would say to Bianca, attention, Bianca, attention, because Bianca would be stepping out into the street. And I thought, oh my gosh. And then Vincenzo, my Italian friend, said, guess what? Attenzione, Bianca, attenzione. I just thought that was so fascinating. That's a pattern. Parents kind of have a system that we use. Well, people on the spectrum are not noticing the patterns. And that's tough. They have to organize the data according to semantic memory, which takes a lot longer. And usually by the time children are through middle school, they have more episodic memory if they're neurotypical, but people on the spectrum tend to stay with the semantic memory. So Diana says, can you address if it is okay to not clue my husband into the fact that he appears to be on the spectrum? I don't think he would handle the information well. Oh, that's a common question, Diana. It is confusing to help somebody who doesn't know they're on the spectrum. It's hard to clue them in, but it's not impossible. And I have had just as many people on the spectrum be relieved to know this. So whenever I've explained it to people, they've mostly just said, "Oh, that makes sense." Every once in a while, I have somebody who just can't accept it because it feels like too much of a criticism. So the best I can tell you is, give it a good try. Ask them to go to a therapist with you that knows about these things and see if the therapist can help you. Because, you're going to be struggling with this relationship stuff for a long time if you don't identify the different ways that you both process information. It's going to be really heartbreaking. So I would just make it a matter of fact. I would just say, hey, I've been reading a few books, or I attended this Facebook Live today, and I've noticed that you have quite a few patterns that fit somebody who's high functioning autism. What do you think? And they might say, oh no, that's not true. But generally they say things like, my secretary tells me that, you know, or my coworker has mentioned this a couple of times, or mom told me that. I love it when they tell you their mother knew it, but they didn't tell you. So usually it works. Also, I highly recommend those screening quizzes online, to have them take one of those, because it's not a diagnosis, but they're pretty good screening tools. And then you can take that screening tool to the psychologist. Oh, one more thing about this, Diana. She says, I don't think he would handle the information well. You know what? I hate to sound rude about this, but so what? You're suffering, right? You're suffering. So just because he or she might be hurt or offended that you bring it up, try to say, hey, I want to make things better for both of us. I want our relationship to soar. So, don't hold back just because they might be a little touchy about it. So Linda, she says, hi, Dr. Kathy. Hi. Yes, our relationship takes so much energy. I offer lots of good suggestions in response to my husband's questions or things he expresses as a problem, but he never takes, oh, there's more down here, my suggestions, and whoops, where'd it go? He never takes my suggestions and seems to not really want help. It takes so much energy I don't want to waste. It is not wanted. It feels like rejection. I feel like I take the bait because I just want to help. Oops, people keep popping things in here and the screen is moving. He seems to reach out for help but really doesn't want it. Okay, it's not true. If he's reaching out for help, I really want you to realize that he wants the help, but he's probably asking the wrong question. Sometimes I will even say that. I know you want to know something. I'm not sure that's the question to ask me, because remember, they're context blind. So they will pick pieces of context to ask you about that's not relevant. And then we keep circling back and trying to clarify. But the problem is, if you answer the wrong question, you're going to go down their transactional path. I hope this isn't too complicated. They tend to answer questions, excuse me, they tend to ask questions in such a way that we feel compelled to answer them, but they might be the wrong question. Let me come back to this because this is a complex one. And let's see what else people have. But I hope that answered it a little bit. And maybe I should stay with this for just a second. Remember, what neurotypicals do is try to open up a conversation. Okay, what we're doing is we're trying to stay connected. So we open it up and open it up and open it up. What the transactional autist is doing is trying to close it down and come to some kind of solution or conclusion. So they ask questions, much like an attorney might, a litigator might in the courtroom, where they're going through their list of questions to make sure they've ticked off all the legal points they need to make for the judge. That's not necessarily a conversation. Don't you feel like you're grilled sometimes by these questions? They just keep coming after you. Well, what about this? And what about this? And didn't you say that? And isn't this true? And so when I did have to testify in courtrooms, I would very quickly turn to the judge and say, because I didn't want to answer all these questions that weren't relevant. I know they're relevant to lawyers. I get that. But, it wasn't something I wanted to do. And I would turn to the judge and I'd say, Your Honor, may I have permission to speak freely? And the judge would always say yes. And then I could open things up. And the attorneys would always object to my position. Your Honor, I have, she can't just talk. And the judge said, well, I can determine whether it's hearsay or anything that I have to rule out, but I'd like to hear what she has to say. So I want you to realize that sometimes he is asking for help, but he's asking you the wrong question. So I want you to use your intuition. Linda, I want you to think about this. You know what's going on. You're neurotypical. You can read between the lines. Use your intuition and say, I'd like to answer that question for you, but how about if I explain something else first? No, give it a try. Okay, Carol says, so heartbreaking when you don't even know what is going on and had never heard of Asperger's or autism. Yes, that's the hard thing. And of course, that's my story. I didn't know what I was dealing with until I was divorced. And it really caused, and of course, it's what made me want to dig in and figure these things out. So it's really is heartbreaking. Oh, by the way, I should mention that I posted on Facebook here and in the Advanced Community Forum. I don't think I sent a message to Meetup. I should do that. But I posted what I'm trying to do is put together a checklist for both neurotypicals and neurodiverse about the kinds of questions that you should ask a potential therapist to help you. All right. And people have been responding and sending me great suggestions of things that they would like to know from a therapist before they agree to work with that person. There's a lot of therapists out there who are kind and really mean well, but don't get this lifestyle at all. And as you know, many of you know, that's heartbreaking too, to be talking to a therapist who says, oh, well, maybe you should just try, this, whatever they give you, some suggestion that would never work in a million years. So Diana says, thanks. I think he is so totally clueless about autism that he doesn't know about high functioning autism. Yes, exactly. That's one of the things that's really helpful. I want to remind people, and I hear this all the time. People will say, oh yeah, my autistic spouse is highly intelligent, highly intelligent. So let me explain this to you. High functioning autism or autism 1, there's many, or Asperger's. These are terms that refer to somebody who's very bright and capable and has a career, and there's all kinds of things they can do. But they're high functioning, not in comparison to neurotypicals. They're high functioning in comparison to other people on the autism spectrum. They're autistic. They're just high functioning compared to other people on the autism spectrum. And I think Diana's right, is that when I've talked to people that are high functioning, but they didn't know it, and I walk them through what that would be, they nearly always say, well, wow, that makes sense. No wonder I've had trouble with my spouse, or no wonder at work people get annoyed with me and I don't really know what it is, or no wonder I never get invited to parties a second time. They might get invited once and they don't get invited back. They start understanding it's because they don't know how to connect smoothly. So let's see here. I want to make sure I'm not missing somebody. Oh, Jessica says, does autism get worse with age? Um, no, I mean, because it's a developmental disorder. So what that means is the brain is just sort of set up a certain way. But like, what we don't know for sure, because people do seem to see the older folks on the spectrum being less capable. Is that because they're depressed, they're anxious, uh, their systems for negotiating the world just don't work as you get older? It's hard to say. I know that couples report this. The neurotypical often reports as they're aging with their autistic spouse that it seems to get worse. But is it the autist that's getting worse, or is the neurotypical just burnt out? Or both? Could be both. Oh yeah. Carol says my her autistic spouse refused to discuss it and banned me from even mentioning it. Um, and I know that's just crazy. My ex-husband threatened to sue me if I told anybody he was on the spectrum. He hasn't done that, but he was just so stressed about the fact that, that I might tell somebody that he's on the spectrum. And yet, there's a number of people in his family on the spectrum. There's now kids and grandkids on the spectrum. Runs in the family. And in fact, what I found amusing is I happened to be talking to his father years ago before he passed away, and I was telling him about our oldest daughter being on the spectrum, and Irving was a doll. He said, "Oh, gosh, those symptoms sound just like me." So he was okay admitting it. He said, "Yeah, that fits. I do those things." So I kind of think that the easiest way to bring this up with your loved ones is to make it as matter of fact as possible. You just say, I love you and I want things to work better. And, there's got to be a way to deal with this. But when they say they don't want to talk about it, or they say it's not true, remember that's that transactional semantic thinking. They're trying to shut it down so the anxiety goes away. You might try saying something like, I know this isn't pleasant to hear and it makes you nervous, but it would sure be a mistake not to investigate something like this, because if it's true, there are answers. I've been reading some books, or I've been talking to this doctor. Oh, Heidi says, does your ex-husband know he's high functioning autistic? He knows I believe that's true. I have no idea if he thinks it's true, but he knows I believe it's true. Let's see here. And it doesn't bother me that he knows. I want him to know. I want him to get his life working better, but I don't know if he will, which is another part of this. There are people in our groups, for example, who are still in these relationships, or they're just dating someone, and they have a neurodivergent relationship. There are some that are separated or divorced, um, and you are profoundly affected by neurodivergence for the rest of your life. Once you step into the world of somebody who thinks so radically different from you, it really changes how you think. I bet that's true for a lot of you. Sometimes you're just so worn out, but then when you start looking at what you have learned as a result of being this loving person who kept reaching out to your partner and trying to fix things, trying to solve the problems between you, that's a real blessing, you know. That means you've done your work. If you're trying to help, that's a big deal. And many in this group have children, and we talk about children a lot. Uh, in fact, just yesterday, no, I guess it was this morning. This morning, I was talking to a small group in my advanced community forum, and we were talking about how to help the children in a neurodivergent home understand better how to deal with neurodivergence so that they feel good about themselves, so they don't grow up thinking something's wrong with them just because their parents struggled. That makes sense, I hope. You know, I had this mom years ago. She was so adorable. She brought her child to me, and sure enough, he was on the spectrum. This was in the days when I was still working in an office. And this little 9-year-old, uh, yes, he's definitely on the spectrum. And she said, "Well, I'm glad that you figured this out, but I don't want to tell him. I'm not ready to have him know this." And and I said, "Well, I think it'd make him feel better to know what's going on. He's not stupid. You know, he knows that there's something. That's why you're bringing him to see Dr. Marshak." So I finally talked to her and talked some sense into her. I said, "Come on, let's let your kid know what's going on with him, and then maybe he can start learning more about how to take better care of himself." So we told him, and he wanted to know more what it was, and we talked in a 9-year-old level, right? So he comes back a week or two later for his therapy session, and he just ran up the stairs. He was so excited. He couldn't wait to talk to me. And he says, "Dr. Marshak, oh my, Dr. Marshak, there's another boy in my class who's got Asperger's." He was so excited that he wasn't alone. See, that's important. The more we know about ourselves, then we're not so alone. So Heidi says, "I notice my Aspie forgets after I ask him to do things. It's like he has Alzheimer's." Why do they forget things? Um, it's the memory issue. That's why I tell them they have to write everything down. It's not a traditional memory issue. Like if we tested their memory with the tools that we have these days, they might show that they actually have okay memory. They're not storing your request as coming from you. Okay? They're trying to memorize your request. We don't do that. We store the memory, we store the request according to the person who asked for it. That's what episodic memory is. I hope that makes sense. If you're trying to memorize everything like a computer, think about your computer too. Your computer botches a lot of things. They're not set up to be as interactive. Even with AI, AI is fascinating, isn't it? AI is so fascinating. I know a man on the spectrum who decided to ask Chat GPT how to be more relationship oriented and empathic with his neurotypical spouse. And he got this great essay from Chat GPT that he was supposed to do this, this, and this, except it didn't really explain how to do it. It just said, Chat GPT just said, this is what you're supposed to do, as if he could easily do it. So uh, let's see what people are saying here. And these are good questions. These are good comments too, helpful. Um, and then Patty or Patricia says that it feels like that he's not really listening to me, and it's true. That's what this is all about. How come it seems so hard? Because we take it emotionally as if they're not listening to us when they're listening to our words. So if we're careful with our words, it may be easier for them to hear you, but they still, I think you also have to be confident enough to say, "Yes, I did say that, but I want you to know there's a lot more. This is what I meant." We've got to help them know that there's more going on in any communication. Is no memory common, says Tony. It's no memory common. Yes, it's part of this. What she's describing is that if you don't store the memory according to the relationship that you're in, it's almost as if it never happened. And that's what we mean about patterns. We've got episodic memory, so we can see the patterns. We know that when our partner is reaching for something, we pass the butter. They don't even have to say it. We know what the gesture means. We've incorporated all kinds of signals into our understanding of what goes on in these patterns. Sonia says, yes, they can be misdiagnosed as ASD, but as they get older may shift to, whoops, as people may shift to, I'm not sure what that word is, traits very similar symptoms. I have found that usually true ASD want to know uh, and strengthen their weaknesses. If they are personality issues, they respond differently. Yes, it's partly true, Sonia, that um, there are a variety of symptoms that look like ASD and they aren't, but um, and then there are people that are narcissistic or have personality traits that make it difficult, but it could be both. So some people who have a very resistive partner with ASD might be struggling with a lifetime of feeling put down and not understood, and you know they may just be very resistive. But this is why I developed the empathy dysfunction scale, by the way. As far as I'm concerned, if someone has empathy dysfunction, whether it's due to narcissism or autism or untreated alcoholism or a head injury, it doesn't really matter. Well, it does matter because we want the proper treatment for that person. But if you're interacting with that person and they have empathy dysfunction, they are not affirming you. They are missing how to connect. So it's always important when you're being treated like that that you put your foot down and say, no, I'm not going to be treated as if I don't count. Oh yes, thank you. You put NAR. Now I know it means narcissistic. I should have figured that one out. Heidi says, does written communication work best? Yes, uh, because it gives the person on the spectrum a chance to think about it, to read it, to process what you're saying, and then write a response. Now, of course, they got to write a response. A lot of times they read stuff and don't come back with anything. Um, but I have I know a man who's on the spectrum, and he learned to start taking notes when he was in middle school. He writes everything down. He's been doing this for decades. Takes a lot of notes, and he really has improved his ability to communicate as a result. The notes slow him down. He doesn't mind saying to people, hey, do you mind if I write stuff down so that I can remember it? We would be okay with that. And as a result of writing things down, I've had actually several clients on the spectrum who do this. As a result of writing things down, um, they have time to think and remind themselves that there's more here. There's more here than they're paying attention to. Christina, my ND spouse has a pattern of passive aggressive behaviors to back me down when he does not understand my opinions. How do I, oops, where'd I go? How do I diffuse it? Oh, what you're noticing are that when she's talking about passive aggressive behaviors, sure, anything to shut you down because they're trying to manage their own anxiety. So you have to be brave. By the way, neurotypicals, especially those that join this group, tend to be highly empathic. So many of you are highly empathic with highly sensitive people on the spectrum, by the way. But highly sensitive doesn't mean they're empathic, it just means they're full of, feelings, but they don't know what to do with them. They don't know how to talk about them. So they just want to shut it down and push it away. So what I would suggest is the way you diffuse it is you lean into it. Go, I know. I make you mad. I know you don't want to talk about this. But you know me. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to bring it up again and again until we get to the bottom of it. So you handle it like you're strong and powerful and they can lean on you. How many in this room know you're empathic? How many of you know that your autistic loved one depends on you a lot? So take it on. Be that strong, loving, kind, supportive person who won't be backed off. So let's see here. Whoops. I can't keep up with everybody. I hope I could get to, oh, yeah, here we go. Wait. What happened to Louise? I know she was there a minute ago. There we go. Because mine is high functioning, others don't always believe that he is and has been tested, and they have no idea what it's like being closed behind closed doors, where it's so obvious that I don't really matter like the facts he's into. I'm now working on my anger for my benefit. Um, yeah, I mean, if somebody doesn't understand this life, there's really no point in even talking to them about it. It just makes you feel crummy. On the other hand, I like Louisa's comment about working on my anger for my benefit. Anger is a normal response for people with PTSD. And we get PTSD in these neurodivergent relationships. People on the spectrum also get PTSD in neurodivergent relationships. But one of the byproducts of PTSD is anger. It's a method for something's wrong and I'm going to fix it. The problem is you keep trying to fix it because try to be a hero and fix it, right? So it's not to stuff your anger. Don't stuff it. It needs to be explored. What are you angry about? You know, what's going on that is bringing this symptom up? Hope that makes sense. We could talk a lot about um, those survival skills. I'll make sure I'm not missing somebody. I think there was some, oh yeah. Jenny says, great question, good. This happens to me all the time. And then, oops, where did we go? Deb says, I learned from you at the early year meetups how to find a time and place for communication with my Aspie, but those times during the day when I need to get a couple of sentences out to him, he will walk out on me halfway through my first sentence. When I call him on it, he is offended and says, you were done talking. What's that? Yeah. Um, I'm inclined to be flippant when they say things like this. What they're doing is what Deb's partner is doing is drawing her into the transaction as he sees it. You were done talking. And you can say, I was taking a breath. I guess I'm not allowed to breathe. I mean, what the heck? Slow down, buddy. I'm not done. That's just plain rude to walk out on you. But by saying you were done talking, do you realize that that's a transaction? That's a transactional approach. I'm taking charge. We're going to do it my way. And you're going to say, nope, we're not doing it my way. Or excuse me, we're not doing it your way. We're going to do it my way. We're going to have a real conversation. Remember, you agreed to have times to talk with me? No, I'm not done talking. By the way, they often think a conversation is you say something, I say something, we're done. Right? It's not a conversation. Yeah, Louise says, yes, he depends on me for sure. Carol, I know I'm an empath. He needed me for this, but it also made him angry. My ex-SB had a lot of anger issues. He said he had empathy too when I told him he didn't. So very defensive. It was exhausting. Yeah, that's why I try to help people on the spectrum understand that they might be sensitive, right? And they may have a strong sense of justice and be kind and have causes they believe in. But that's not the same as empathy. Empathy is the ability to figure out what's going on in the context that's important to the other person, connect them up to what's important to yourself, get some affirmation going both ways, talk about it. And somebody who's highly empathic is able to talk about difficult stuff. things that hurt. We hang in there with people. We're willing to do that. They are not. They're no good at this. But it doesn't mean they don't care. And if we can get them past the defensiveness and they put things in writing, we put things in writing, sometimes we can come back a few hours later and get to the bottom of things. Okay, I think I better wrap things up. I just looked at the clock. Thank you so much. We have a lot of people who showed up today. Now remember, I will go in. If you've got more questions, feel free to post them. I'll go in and talk about them later. And I'd appreciate it if you went to my other Facebook post and gave me your comments about what you would like in a checklist for therapists, because therapists are like a lot of your friends. They might mean well, but they don't understand this life if they haven't spent some time in it. And that's the reason I do this work. And my mom was on the spectrum. I married a man on the spectrum, and I adopted a kid on the spectrum. And I found people on the spectrum throughout my family tree. Okay, take care, everybody. And we will, oh, by the way, oh shoot, I didn't have enough time to do this either. I've got a bunch of questions that people posted. I didn't get to all of them that you posted ahead of time. So what I'm going to do is I am going to respond to those questions too. So if you posted something and was hoping it was going to come up today, not to worry, I will respond. Okay, take care, everybody. We'll see you again next month.